I want to be clear. My job is to produce the most beautiful book I can produce for you that doesn't lose value. CGC, they work for me. I don't do anything for them. They do stuff for me.
Of course,
my clients. What I do is I use every possible technique I think can meet that criteria for my client. Bringing all that together is the value we provide.
Hey guys, before we get into the show, we need to take a quick moment to shout out our sponsors. First up, Ultra Pro. Ultra Pro has the best protective materials for your card, gaming, or even comic book collecting needs. Here in their shop, they have all sorts of goodies like top loaders, bags and boards, and even UV protected holders. And the best part is, if you head over to their online store, ultrapro.com, and use my promo code SWAGGLE, which you'll see in the description, you'll be able to save 5% off on your next order. Again, that is ultrapro.com. Use promo code SWAGGLE to save 5%. This episode of Swagglecast is also sponsored by me. The pulp adventure continues with issues 2 and 3 of my comic series, Sanity, a noir detective story set in the Lovecraftian universe. The pre-launch page has just awakened from its cosmic slumber, so go give it a follow and stay informed on the madness to come. Link in the description. And if you would like to get caught up on the journey, you can also pick up issue 1 at swagglehosscomics.com. That is swagglehosscomics.com. Thank you all so much for watching and for your continued support of the channel. Now, with all the sponsors out of the way, let us get on with the show. All right, well, I'm with Barry from comicpresser.com. Barry, so good to see you. Thank you for hopping on the channel today. How's it going?
Hey, Mickey. Good, thanks. Grateful to be here and happy to sort of be part of the stories, you help people uncover in the comic community.
Yeah, definitely. For those who don't know you, Barry, we got a chance to meet at Collector Summit. Obviously it was a great show, and I've been wanting to get you on, a podcast thing so that we can kind of get into all of the interesting topics within, comic book pressing and all the things that relate to it, all the services that you do. And we're definitely going to get into that. And we're going to learn about your story, but I feel like given the current climate, given what's going on with CGC and the fact that I have you here as somebody who, as a presser, you have to crack tons and tons of slabs. You have to, constantly regrade books that have already been slabbed. There, you see it right there. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't just start, talking about, some of the CGC stuff with you. I don't know. Do you have any sort of top level thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, it's kind of been a whirlwind of information and communication, right? A couple of parties who go, 99 Newsstand, West Coast Avengers, a few others, started breaking this information about this scam. And I picked it up on Instagram, probably the channel I'm most active in, and came to learn about it through many other people. And I threads I've seen in other places like the CGC forums, and I've just watched it kind of mushroom. What I can say is that I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, comics are a niche market that have high value assets that have a monopoly, virtual monopoly provider of authenticity, guarantees. And that's the G in CGC, is a guarantee.
Right.
So, I mean, fraud's bound to happen. So I guess I wasn't surprised by that. Then I started seeing, speculation on how the fraud was happening, which is, pretty ingenious and pretty niche and pretty ballsy. And, just learning with everybody about, how such a thing could come to be. It's been called a reholder scam. I've seen videos on how to, put stuff in and out. The slabs are not that secure. I mean, we open them every day. Probably takes 3 to 10 seconds to get into a CGC slab by hand, but we do typically destroy it, to open it. We're not trying to open it seamlessly and close it again. So the fact that you can get into it quickly enough is good. We do open CBCS labs. They're much more secure, harder to get into. They definitely need to be destroyed the way we do it to get into any of them. So, yeah, I mean, I do see some issues. I've heard talk about sacrificial labels and tamper-evident color changing and, invisible ink and etching of certain numbers on both inner and outer case and all types of remedies. And if indeed this scam is being done through reholdering, which sounds feasible, but still is speculation. Mm-hmm. And if indeed it's being swapped out by parties external to CGC and by buying open market low-grade books and putting in high-grade books, that's what they're doing, then it looks like the community's got a nice path to it. Interestingly, there still seems to be an investigation at CGC of what's going on. They published a list of the books, but even though they called it, I guess, roughly all the books, they said their list couldn't change. So I assume that as more parties look into this, more things will happen. But I've been learning a lot, and that's just a little bit of repeating back of what I've come to understand.
Right. I mean, the reason I think I lead you with that question is because I think of pressers as like the one group of people in this hobby that are uniquely positioned into this idea of like actually opening up the case, and like you said, for the most part, you probably just rip it open and don't think twice about it. But you guys are the ones that could ever have that moment where you lie your head on the pillow and you think to yourself like, if somebody really wanted to open it like this, they could. And I'm sure, and to push it, a little further down, this idea of like, you guys are also uniquely positioned where, with my books over there, I've never cracked open a book personally. Right. So I have this idea of, opening up a blue label and having it like missing an ad page, even though it says blue label. Like I've never had that experience. It's never occurred to me, but I have to imagine maybe in your journeys, you've come across something like that. Maybe not that drastic, but some sort of shenanigans. And I just wonder if you've ever had thoughts on that. I mean, I feel like you guys are the ones that would have that experience.
We do have that experience. You never know what you're going to get, if you will. I mean, it's kind of like, CGC slabs aren't like boxes of chocolate, but some apparently can be. When somebody sends us a slab, there's two ways they send it to us. They either say, don't crack it unless you think I can get an upgrade, but take a look at it. Or they send it to us with an order that says, press and clean this book. It's rare that it's up to us to evaluate it from the outside and then decide to crack it or not. If we get it, we're almost always cracking the slab and proceeding with it, unless we're instructed not to, which can be done in our order forms. So, but we have definitely run across books that are not what they appear to be. And in particular, I brought some examples to talk about. I'm willing to talk about some. One example is we got a book that was a Hulk 340.
Right. Let me show. Not to cut you off, I'll show people here so they can take a look at it. You can talk over this.
Yeah, sure. Okay. It's a Hulk 340, white pages, newsstand, Mark Jeweler. And that is the type of book that's involved in this current scam. This particular book was graded at CGC in January 2023. And we received the book in April of 2023. This went through CCS pressing, as I understand it, and was basically bought raw by the owner, as they told me. And then they sent it to CGC on their own, under their own account. And we got the slab sent to us by the owner saying, can you get a better grade than 9.0? We took the slab and opened it and shot it. This is one of our typical before pictures. We provide before and after images for everything we do. And this is the before picture. This is going, you probably can't see it here. Maybe there'll be a zoom in, edited in after or later, but ultimately there's tears over the word Marvel in the upper left-hand corner of this book. There's tick marks going down the side of the book. There's probably 15 of them. And there's wear on each corner. And then now, could we have seen it through a slab? We could have, but we just ripped it open first and then started taking pictures. This book here, it's hard to see, I think, in the zoom back, but every corner has wear. There's little folds and breaks on every corner. So we pressed this book. This is the before picture. I'm not going to delight you with the after pictures of the pressing, but what we did was we sent it back for a regrade. Here's what we got for the regrade. 7.5 restored.
Wow.
So after our improvements, we came back with this book for our client. And needless to say, our client was beside himself. He wanted to know, had we irresponsibly handled the book to cause a downgrade? He wanted to know, did we retouch the book without telling him to fix a problem?
Right.
And I'm chuckling because it's not funny. I mean, we literally had, serious conversations about what happened, but the only conclusion we could reach is CGC missed it. That was our conclusion. CGC handed us a restored book in a 9.0 slab, even though it had all types of other wear and color breaking defects. We just chalked it up to incompetence.
Yeah.
And, you know, now with these types of books being the fuel for an ever, perpetual 9/8 potential reholdering type of scam, wonder, could this book have been plucked out of the holder somehow before it got to my client? Or no, maybe not. Maybe just CGC missed it. But if you go back to that 7.5, that color touch is C2.
Right.
C is amateur color touch, and you can only have a 1, 2, or 3 without really like drawing a paintbrush over the whole cover.
Right.
This is black Sharpie on the side. I mean, it's literally white tick marks covered in black marker that bled through.
Right. Can you quickly just for those who don't know the C1 and C2 thing, like in my understanding, C1 is just a small amount, and then C2 is more, and then C3 is more. Like, is there like how much are we talking about here with your finger? Okay. As far as like amount that's colored.
All right. In general, the scales for conservation and restoration, which is what are the changes made to the book that are in those categories, go A, B, C. A is the least. A is the most professional. Okay. A is highly professional, minimal conservation level restoration. B is in the middle, more than that. And C is amateur restoration. It's the type of materials you use and the type of techniques you use. Okay. So if it's household tools, you can buy it at Target, and use it. You're going to get a C. Okay. And so then 1, 2, 3 is the amount, the severity, the quantity. And so a C3 is like, piece fill, and, somebody glued a color part of a color copy onto the cover. That's a C3.
Right.
Okay. This is a C2. This is Sharpie marker on the side. That's what a C2 is. And, I mean, again, if CGC missed it, stuck it in a 9.0 blue label. I mean, it is possible, but now in hindsight with this thing, I mean, it's a real issue. So, but the point is, I didn't bring it on here to accuse anybody of anything. And the fact that I have this here is just timely. But, I brought it here to just, as we talk about pressing, the expectation is every book goes up. If I send it to you, if I put the money into it, you're my presser, you're my value enhancer, and we take that seriously. Our job is to increase value for our clients and pay for ourselves. And, but because CGC grades are so intricately tied with value in the comic book market, and because restoration or change is allowed, it's not allowed in cards. It's not contemplated in posters. Comics have restoration built into the grading system. It's an expectation. It just has its own rules.
Right.
So, yeah. So anyway, we definitely have run across stuff where it wasn't what we expected when we opened it. Not all the books we press are graded at all, or they've been cracked out by the client. But in this case, in this example, we have run across books that could fit into the scam, that show how you don't always get what you expect inside these holders. And where, the effort to press and clean and crack and press and resubmit doesn't always cause the book to go up for things you cannot always anticipate.
Right. I definitely want to revisit this a little bit later on, but before we go into the weeds in it, maybe we can kind of start a little bit further back and just kind of, learn a little bit more about you. So you got the comicpresser.com. You've been into comic books for, I don't know how long you've been doing it, but how did you even fall into this world of pressing? Like, how did you actually get your start? Where did this all come from? I
collected comic books as a kid, and I kind of stopped when heroes got mullets. So right about there, I went to college and did all sorts of other things. And I went to art school. So I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I have a 4-year arts degree. And I'm a graphic designer by training. So I'm printing and packaging and paper and ink, trained in that. I had a career as a graphic designer and then art director. I owned my own agency. Then I sold it and went back to business school. And when I was in business school, I learned I was good at statistics. Kind of got into analytics and data and started software development and spent a lot of time in the world of patents and intellectual property, and just started learning about technology and how other people did it. While I was doing that, got into my 40s, my kids, found myself with some time and money and got back into comics. I bought a collection on Craigslist of I couldn't believe, just my first collection ever. And it was these beautiful high grade bronze comics, and it had a Scooby-Doo one in it. I didn't know what a Scooby-Doo one was. I bought it for 20 cents. I'm like, I only want the superhero comics. And I was like, okay, I'll take your Archies and whatever, you know? And so I got these books and I bought an overstreet price guide to see what it was. And in that particular issue, the Scooby-Doo book was featured twice in the market reports as a hard to find rare book. I'm like, oh my God, I found a treasure. You know, it was a 7.0 ultimately that I was able to press it to. And so basically I got back into collecting and love it. You know, I love the smell of comics. I have nothing with, you know, I'm a CGC dealer. I have great, you know, reverence for what they do and slab books, but ultimately I like my books raw. And as an artist, I like my books beautiful and clean, the cleanest books I could get. So ultimately, I just started trying to improve the books and buy more collections. I started a business, you know, I became a dealer first and started buying collections with a partner, a very talented, high net worth individual with a real eye for comics and great customer service attitude, and learned a lot collaborating. And I was sort of the marketing and pressing guy. So we started pressing our books, and then I started producing how-tos on pressing. Not that I was right or genius or whatever. I was just sharing. At the time, you know, pre-social media, whatever, it seemed the thing to do. But over the years, I learned the value of the information was better kept secret, CGC's IP strategy. And it's not just what you do, it's the craftsmanship with which you do it. So since pressing and cleaning is really the only way to buy a collection at market value and sell a collection at market value, be fair to everybody and still make money, I thought it had to be a skill to be mastered. So we were doing our own thing, but honestly, I find it very tiring to sell one comic book, ship one comic book, and seek positive feedback on one comic book at a time. That is not just a full-time job. That is an absolute lifetime commitment. So with an eye on technology and skills in running businesses and desire to stay in comics, but not be a dealer in the traditional sense, just tried to bring scale, technological scale to comic pressing. And I've spent several years just taking money from one business and putting it into another and experimenting. And while we were doing it, we've had some good timing. You know, we just had the ability to latch on to other innovations that have come out in the space and things that aren't in the space, like AI, and how that brings efficiency to everything we do, and what, not just how we look at data, but how machines turn themselves on and off or learn. And so, yeah, I'm just very excited to be in the collectibles industry at this time because, you know, I'm a communications minded entrepreneur with a great respect for craftsmanship. And people like you know, when I met you, you know, I jokingly called you the Conan of the comic set. You know, I mean, you've got this congenial producer, you know, host style with, you know, an entertainment mindset and, you know, cachet. So, you know, I'm learning so much. I'm meeting so many cool people, and you know, comics have is a knowledge intensive hobby. You meet very bright, very learned people, and so yeah. Anyway, I got into it. It turns out to try my hand at artistry in a new way, to explore the hobby in my own personal sense, but actually, it turns out I want to do business with learned, interesting people, and my careers have allowed me to do it. And I'm excited to be in this one.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that artistry and stuff that you kind of referenced with regards to pressing and cleaning. I know a lot of people who are watching this, you know, people who watch my videos, I think that there's a large amount of people that are really, really, really educated in this space, but then there's probably also people who aren't as clear with pressing and cleaning, or maybe they never sent in books to be graded and things like that. So can you walk us through, you know, what is pressing cleaning really quickly, just so everyone can get caught up, and can you manage the expectations with it? Like what can you expect with it, you know, as far as like what can be improved upon a book, and then also, you know, what should you not expect? And then maybe we can transition that to, you know, why someone would want to do it, both aesthetics and value. So can you talk just a little bit macro view, like what does pressing and cleaning do?
Sure. I mean, I'm a student of it, so I'm not going to come at this like I'm an expert. I've done it every day for years.
Right.
So I will only talk about my trial and error, but it's like downhill skiing. You know, I mean, it is as exhilarating and exhausting as that at times. Other times it's a walk in the park. So cleaning and pressing in general is removing aesthetic problems on the comics That could be stains, added dirt, debris, grime, markings. And it is also the shaping of the comic, the spine management, the paper around the staples, the pristineness of the corners, the cleanness and sharpness of edges, and then the pressing, which is the management of the surface, the smoothing of the surface, and again the finessing and shaping of the book to create what looks like a found in nature, highest quality collectible. Cleaning and pressing is the way to shape the collectible and present it such that it is in its highest quality, acceptable condition for its highest quality grade. And so there's a set of rules at CGC, and cleaning and pressing is not just what you do, it is what you do to a set of standards that are set by a third party that the industry has elected as its authority.
Right. So in a way, ultimately what you're trying to do is trying to get that book as much to what it was on the shelf way back when it got printed as possible without
better than that.
Adding anything.
Yeah, you could buy a brand new book today. Go buy some 1 in 25 Spider-Man variant today. You're still not going to get a 98.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, no, pressing and cleaning, in many cases, it's not the only way. There were 9/8 before pressing and cleaning. They're just even rarer. They do exist. But even coming off a printing press, you're not guaranteed to get a 9/8 quality item. And yeah, over time is your enemy, because the construction and the manufacturing techniques of the paper and the book or the bindery that goes with the paper many times cause the items to self-destruct. There's a chemical reaction that happens in the paper, in old paper, that causes basically the cellulose, the paper fiber, to deteriorate through basically through a change. The paper is actually changing into sugar. You have a glucose problem inside that cellulose, and so your paper breaks down over time. Acid in the paper is accelerating this. And we see this as a browning or a staining or a reddish set of blotching on the paper. So paper destroys itself, and the way things were made weren't designed to make things to mechanical perfection, but they can be shaped that way, and there are accepted approaches to do it. And let's call all that cleaning and pressing is what's trying to shape it to testability.
Now, and then just to kind of wrap that summary up in a bow, what cleaning and pressing is not is what is commonly known as restoration, where if there is actually a color break, you're not going to fill in the color that has now been removed through that damage.
That's a complicated setup, Mickey. It's just not that simple. See, there's the entire professional art world's definition of restoration and conservation. And then there's CGC's definition, which is not anywhere else in the world. So it's not that easy. Cleaning, you can get a restoration notation for cleaning, you can get a conservation notation for cleaning, or you can just get a blue label for cleaning.
Yeah.
What's acceptable is considered dry cleaning, though the reality is that's not detectable. What you detect is whether or not something's been left behind that looks like it wasn't dry at one time, or something else has happened that dry cleaning wouldn't produce. So we're hiring CGC when we grade a book to do a forensic analysis on their observations. They're not doing anything that's like sacrificial, where they take a piece of the book and they dip it into can't hurt the book. So it's really their powers of observation. But ultimately, cleaning and pressing can lead to a non-restored, conserved, or restored grade. And what conservation and restoration means is whatever CGC says it means.
Well, I think that's a really good setup too, where I ultimately want to go with this. But before I get there, it is really interesting because when we speak, in these terms within context to, cleaning and pressing and comic books and things like that, I mean, really, based on their position, we really are talking about CGC standards, aren't we? I mean, like any cleaning and pressing service that is out there is going to right. You hold up the CGC book. Any cleaning and servicing, pressing service out there like yourself is only going to do stuff that they think that CGC is going to be okay with, right? So
No,
they sort of said
that's
that.
not
Oh,
true.
really?
Yeah, we don't. I want to be clear. My job is to produce the most beautiful book I can produce for you.
Oh, see, that's
That
interesting.
doesn't lose value.
Okay, that doesn't lose value. Sure.
CGC, I don't do anything for CGC. I hire them. They work for me. I don't do anything for them. They do stuff for me.
Of course,
and my
yeah.
clients.
Yeah.
What I do is I use every possible technique I think can meet that criteria for my client. And bringing all that together is, the value we provide. And my job, the fact, our books are transformative. We've been able to grow in this business because we have, what people call mind-blowing transformations, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of people want the transformation. They hire a cleaner and presser because they want to kind of be the catalyst for finding this piece of history, and it's like the brush on the archaeological dig. We kind of pulled it back, and there's that rib bone, and we're really excited. Let's get that whole Tyrannosaurus out of the sediment, right? And so we're helping people unearth latent value. The fact that I do it within a certain set of constraints is that I'm able to do it because I can get the range of effects I want and my artistic palette and increase value simultaneously. Of course, I respect what CGC has to do, and I read and follow what is considered valuable. But there are any number of ways to reattach a cover. There are any number of ways to remove dirt or added ink from a surface. Some of them are dry, some of them are wet, some of them are cutting edge like a laser. There's the word laser not to be found. They have no position whatsoever.
Right.
So the point is that I cannot wait for CGC to tell me how to do my job just to figure out what I'm going to do to make them like me or my client. But I have to not lose value for the client, and I can't go get them a book that the market sees as a lower value item when they've hired me to just do an ordinary value increasing job. So we work within their thing, but we don't in any way design what we do to what CGC has to say. We absolutely design our behavior, and we design our communications to make sure we professionally work within what will help both the client and respect the role of CGC when we hire them for a great activity.
Yeah, that's actually very, very well put as far as like a sort of the mission statement for how you kind of view it. Let me ask this idea of maybe what is, kind of been a little bit of a hot button. I don't know if we'll call it a cleaning technique or a whitening technique, or, making covers appear whiter. And I don't know. I'm a layman. I don't know what the processes are, but every now and again, I'll come across a YouTube video of someone I got the purple label, and it's, they talk about like, they whitened the cover through whatever process, and CGC gave them this purple label. And I think that there's been a lot of debate amongst the community of like, whitening covers based on lighting, whitening covers with chemicals, and all these sort of things. And I wonder if you have like thoughts on this, and maybe can sort of unpack it a little bit and just kind of talk about what is seemingly kind of the new frontier of controversy within the cleaning pressing space, and CGC giving out purple labels to whitening processes. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, it's a constant game of innovation when you deal with comic books. And so CGC has points of view that evolve over time, and things they don't understand, they mark the way they want. Then they change their mind, and you pay them to mark it differently. As long as you keep paying them, they'll keep giving you a new opinion each time. And so, in general, whitening techniques that have been recently sort of disclosed in such a way as to create an echo chamber on YouTube and other social media that amplify these techniques over and over, whether they're right or wrong. wrongly applied, not right or wrong ethically or morally.
Right.
Using cleaning and solvents and everything else is the first week of conservator school. There's no professional conservator in the world that wouldn't use the right solvent in the right case or whatever. But if you hurt an item's historical significance, that would be different. Ironically, in comic book grading, the things that would help improve the life and health and historical longevity of items are nothing to do with CGC grading. It's crazy. Right. You would want to remove the acids from a cover. You would want to deacidify it. To do that, you have to bathe it in many cases, though there are new innovative ways to deal with this. CGC, I think, is coming around to that, but cleaning a cover right now requires taking it off and bathing it in a bath, as one example. And that's considered in some cases restorative. In other cases, it's the only way any professional conservator can prolong the life of the paper, which is essential for CGC survival. So all I can say is that, yeah, cleaning is restoration comes with a point of view that evolve over time, especially at CGC.
Could you steel man the like old school collectors thought process of like why they feel like, yeah, bathing a cover and like making it whiter would be something that's like, oh, not on my book. Like that definitely should get a purple label. That's so not allowed. Like why would CGC have that stance? Or why would the comic community feel like that shouldn't be allowed? Do you know?
I can't speculate on anyone's state of mind. What I can tell you is what I hear. I've run across dealers who I've talked about lightning comic book covers, with using light. I mean, you just hold the comic book up to the light. You're lightening the comic book right now.
Right.
You don't do anything. It's just really slow, right? You can use different types of light and the comic book lightens faster. You can put it in the window of the comic book store and it will lighten over time, just not the way you want. And so I've gotten a very hostile reaction from what I would call people who are comic book purists, been in it longer than me, know much more than me, make more money than me, have more respect and standing and connection in the community than me. And so I take seriously the fact that you can't just broach this topic lightly with just anybody. But the reality is exposing paper to light to treat the paper is a time-honored technique that goes back to papyrus. So it certainly predates Stan Lee, and I would argue Jack Kirby too. So, as we do what we do in the comic book cleaning and pressing world, let's call that comic conservation and restoration. The problem is restoration has become a dirty word.
Yeah.
So people don't want you to do this or do that because they don't want the value to go down in many cases. I say people. We serve many more people who've never pressed a comic in their life till we got to connected with them than people who press and press and press and press. And that's the rest of the world because people have woken up to grading. They know they need to grade their comic to make money from it because the audience they need to sell it to isn't in their hometown. And therefore e-commerce is required. And this is how it works. And the moment you wake up to what grading is, you realize cleaning and pressing is pretty much a must. And those are the people that, we're building our clientele with, in large part. And so they're not telling us, no one's going, don't whiten it, don't do this, don't do that. The most learned people might say that. But I mean, who goes to a mechanic and says, don't adjust the, don't check the computer module. Don't do that.
Right.
I know it's the fan, fix the fan. No, of course not. You turn to people for their expertise. You hire them for the results you expect, and then you let them do their job. My job is to not make the value go down and to provide a high level of professional craftsmanship that's not attainable from a book and a press you buy on Amazon 3 days earlier, and so that's where we see our role, and growing.
I think that is such a clear way to put it, where I want you guys to make my book look the best it possibly can. That's all I want.
Without the value decrease.
And you want to do that as well, and just make sure that the value doesn't go down. And however we get there from A to B, it doesn't actually matter. I mean, it does matter because you have to develop techniques.
Well, so actually, let me not to correct you, but to add to what you're saying, it does matter. And the people on your show, it matters a lot to. See, communication, it turns out, is the most important ingredient we found goes into cleaning and pressing, besides the cleaning and pressing. It's not even the grading. It's the setting of expectations and the respect for the need, because people have different reasons they press the book. And depending if they're a collector or they're stuck with it, and believe me, it's both. There are people who are stuck with Amazing Fantasy 15s. They don't know why. They know it's valuable. They don't want it. They want the money. And between them and the money is all this knowledge and the comics racket. And they have to get through that. So, I mean, as we work with them, communication is the key. We definitely care about what they want and how they want. But ultimately, people who tell us what they want to get out of it, not how to do it, often get the better results. But we have some very learned clients. Many of our clients press their own books. They just don't want to work at the level. They don't want to take the risk on a really big book, or there's something fragile or whatever. They want someone who's willing to share that risk with them in a professional way. So now people definitely tell us what they want, but they often not telling us how to do it. They're like, but they say, I heard this, try this, or hey, it's not, have you thought about doing it this way? Like, we're totally receptive to that. In our order forms, you can tell us, what to watch out for, all that stuff. But ultimately, it's the watch outs that we probably spend more time with than the how-tos. But people care. But still, we stay goal-oriented. We found that is the most rewarding when ultimately we're bringing something back that is not lost its value and is the cleanest and, most aesthetically, most structurally presentable thing we can deliver.
Right. There's something that's interesting. You mentioned talking about people who do their own pressing, but then like if all of a sudden it's a book at a certain maybe value range, well, it's like, I'd rather give this to Barry, and I completely understand that. And I think that this is an interesting thing where I do feel like a lot of people in the community eventually hit that place where, oh yeah, I'd like to learn my own pressing, and they kind of do it on the side. And, even for myself, I don't do it, but there are certain books that are just sort of my not valuable, my own collecting book that, if I knew how to press, I'd be like, yeah, I would just do that. And it would just be nicer aesthetically for my own like raw collection or whatever. But I do think it's interesting where there's a lot of bigger pressers like yourself and companies that have really become, well, if I have a high grade AF-15 or I have some really high grade Golden Age book, well, I'm going to send it to, one of the handful of people that can actually do this and handle this. And that puts a lot of liability, like responsibility into your guys' hands when you get some of these books. Can you talk about that? I mean, we've had some issues in the community, some accounts of like certain pressers maybe messing up something or, being delayed on deliveries and things like that, and having very, very expensive inventory come through their doors. How do you guys approach those types of liabilities and that type of level of collectible? And maybe I guess we could talk about insurance and stuff, but even knowing what I know about my own collectible insurance, like there are some limitations with this. Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So pressing a comic is risky. You really can't insure against the risk that something that you downgrade the book while you're trying to improve it.
Right.
We're constantly researching how our conservators and other restoration firms insure themselves. Right now, our primary insurer is Collectibles Insurance, like you. We have to constantly assess our inventory for value. We have to carry a relative percentage of all value we have on hand must be insured for any loss. So even if we lose a little bit, if we weren't insured properly for everything on hand, we risk not being fully compensated for a small loss. We've never, by the way, had to use our insurance policy. We've never had a claim to date in years. So, but ultimately, we constantly assess our inventory on hand. We're constantly trying to get it out because it costs more to keep it here, right? It costs more to keep the insurance ratio current, and it's difficult. We have to grade every book that comes in. Pretty much. We don't grade it. We're not CGC. We're not grading it. It's not a CGC grade. We are cracking the book and going through it and reaching a conclusion. We're doing that, which is why, for example, in my first visual example, we cracked that book and looked at it, even though possibly through the case we could have seen that it was not a 9.0 even in the case. But we carry collectibles insurance. We are insured for loss and for theft and fire and things like that. We're not insured for a loss of value while trying to improve the book, and people need to understand that. I'm sure that will keep us out of some things, but we do some other things. For some clients, I've offered to do the work on site. Believe it or not, cleaning and pressing is a modular type of business in the way we've set it up. We're modular. We're a factory with modules. And ultimately, I can replicate one of my modules anywhere as long as it has the right cleanliness, climate, and electrical configurations. It needs those things. But and security. But in general, you just need some decent lighting and a clean air and a few other things, and you can start working heads down. I would say this is not a wartime profession. If we were under attack or in an environment where, God forbid, we were like some other nations in the world, is difficult. It would be difficult to get people smooth, clean comics maintained in a perfect state all the time. So again, we're an interesting profession that requires a few things, but we cover the risk through insurance, through craftsmanship, and some transparency. And then we have a guarantee. So, we have some accountability. We don't guarantee we're going to do the best job. Again, I've had pop staples and, pieces fall off and stuff. People send us incredibly fragile items with the expectation that because they're tan or brown, we can make them white because we have that reputation. And we try not to work on stuff we know is foolishly crazy, but sometimes we have to open the book to see what's wrong. And the moment you open it, you can potentially have a risk. That's why we provide before and after pictures for every job. We also have, we have visual evidence. We at least can know where we started before we touched anything. And we have communications. We check in after the book's been received. We check in sort of the midpoint, and we kind of check in at the tail. We communicate at the tail with images and expectations. So, again, insurance, communication, a guarantee that if we get you if the book comes back with cleanable and pressable graders notes, we'll fix those. No charge, no hassle. We'll do that. If the book comes back restored or conserved and it's through something we did or didn't do or CGC thinks we did, we will take it back and we will work through it. So, these are the types of things we do to try to create accountability, which isn't always the same as, complete risk. We don't get rid dispel the risk, but we try to mitigate it. So those are some of the things we do.
As far as like the liability and being able to handle this book and like the individual person doing it. And then you mentioned how you can do your techniques, be modular with it. I wanted to have that segue over to this idea of like scalability and artistry in it, because in one of the things I was sort of cryptically alluding to, a situation where maybe someone got backed up with a bunch of stuff and they couldn't get out all the books they needed to go, and that, everything is, a backlog. I think that there probably is some issue with the fact that, like, sometimes cleaning one book at a time takes a lot of time, especially if it's a high value book and it requires a lot of, tender love and care. How do you guys approach that as a business? In getting into like cleaning and pressing, like how do you guys scale, and like can you scale? And I think you even noticed on your website, you have like, like for hire, like you're hiring people that want to press through you guys and things like that. Like, can you teach this artistry to people? Is it that simple? Certainly there has to be people that are better at it than others, but like, or maybe not. Maybe it's all technique. What's your thoughts on
that? How you interview? No question. Yeah. Wait. So just so what you do is you get some. If you want to hire a good cleaner and presser, you need somebody who's detail oriented. We don't hire cleaners and pressers, but we might hire a cleaner. Cleaning is there's like just cleaning is actually there's 1,000 ways to do it. There's really only in our place you must press the books. We have equipment. It's tied to the equipment. But we use lots of different types of equipment, and we have techniques that we use. But ultimately, on cleaning, there's you can have somebody who's a wizard. I'm Bernie Wrightson with an eraser,
right?
And I'm Dread Pirate Roberts with a razor blade, And so when it comes to doing what we need to do, right? I mean, I'm an artist in those respects. I got better things to do sometimes than to be under high magnification with a fine eraser, which is some of other things that we do, right? And so, but we have technology, like magnification. What we do, we stream all of our work to large screens in the office. So you can see what somebody's doing on the channel. We don't. I have a YouTube channel, so really not much on it. I mean, I don't publish this yet, but I mean, all of our work is literally you can see in giant size what's happening, so you can find problems and fix them. So I mean, as we work, it is teachable but again, we built this business to scale. That's our entire thesis for entering where there's been years and years of experienced people, brilliantly talented, conservators and people who used to work for CGC and do their own thing, people entering the field, and everybody and their mom and pop watching a video, buying a book, and starting some aspect of it. And it's democratizing. I mean, you and an eraser, you can start this. But let's be clear, there are many, many great home cooks. Once in a while, they go out to eat at a restaurant. You can do both. You can hire someone to cook for you, even though you're a great cook. But not every restaurant is a Michelin-starred, dining establishment. And so, we're trying to be a Michelin-starred dining establishment that ultimately are masters of sous vide, if you know that cooking style, which is essentially using fine temperature control and fine humidity and water control to create nuanced flavors in food that anybody can get, but can't always bring out. And so, ultimately it is teachable. Our growth was based on day one, creating processes to handle vintage and antique paper at scale. That's our core competency, moving the paper around from process to process without damaging it. And because we can move, the process is designed not to damage paper as it moves through various stages, we can absolutely have a talented and dedicated and craftsmanship-oriented trained team member pick something up and put it down for an imaging stage, which we certainly do now, or pick it up and put it down for a grading stage, or pick it up and put it down for a cleaning stage without fearing for the loss of the item, the relationship, or the value.
Right. I do want to show some of the stuff that you have been working on, because I think there might be interesting things to just talk about while we
more stories, maybe, who knows?
Yeah, while we look at it and things like that. But also maybe in this story time, you can kind of maybe even address going back to what we were discussing offline, where a lot of times, like what people are cleaning and pressing, the reason everyone's doing this is like, yes, for aesthetic purposes. Yeah, it's nicer to have a cleaner book than it is to not have a cleaner book. But if we're probably being honest, I mean, I don't know your client base, but I'm going to assume that the majority of them are more interested in doing it to increase the value of that book.
Not all. A lot of them are just trying to hang it on the wall. See, the slab culture requires you to only enjoy the outside of the book and primarily the front cover. And actually, the slab culture is a cover-driven culture now. People buy the cover. You say buy the book, not the grade. People buy the cover. And so ultimately, look at you. I mean, again, the value you're getting from those books behind you are strictly on the cover until you decide to do something else with it. Then they're in position to do more with. But ultimately, and then the CGC grade adds the value. That's why that number in the corner is so important. And Beckett's tried 6-7 times to imitate exactly what it looks like without.
That's fair, because I would say that I've definitely cleaned and pressed books that I knew it wasn't going to bump the grade, but when it's in the case, I still want it aesthetically to look better, which I know it will. But I guess my question with that is, do you find people, even though the bulk is for aesthetics, are they still sending it in to be graded after the fact? Do you think most people still are sending it to be graded after it goes through your doors? They probably send it in, or you guys send it in?
We meet people on different journeys. You can get the book graded because you're getting it regraded. You didn't like the first grade. You can get it graded because it's never been graded and you want to see the grade you're going to get. You can get it graded because you're going to sell the book and you need to make money from it, and this is how you do it. You can get it graded because you want to pass it on to the next generation and you're worried they're not going to be able to monetize it or move it successfully without it being prepared to go to market in the most professional way. You can get it graded because you watch this thing tanning and browning, and if you don't get it in a case now and you wait another year, it'll be even worse off. there's lots of reasons to grade a comic book. And besides all of those, there's plenty of people who just have us press the books and they go back into mylars or sleeves, or, their long boxes are up on their wall, pinned, or on a rack, or, a comic spinner rack in their house or whatever. So what I can say is we meet people who have all different interests in making the books look great, and grading is a huge part of it. But I would say of all of our sales, grading is still only 20 to 25% of our sales, even though that is still a biggest driver of contacting us. So anyway, that's the driver there.
Well, I got some of these ones that you sent over here. I thought.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is cleaning with lightning, and it's dramatic.
Right.
And we post stuff like this on our Instagram feed. If you are interested in following us at comic_presser, that'd be great. On Instagram, if you use that service. But what is interesting is when you can have really dramatic changes on the paper, and when we work, many times the books are not disassembled. We lighten the book, we remove stains. Some people would call this restoration. If we left stains in an illogical place and we sent the book in for grading, CGC might call it restoration. But the owner of this book paid $50 for it at a garage sale. It looked like somebody had thrown up their dinner on it and then handed it to the dog, who took it out and left it in the driveway, after which a car rolled over it in the thaw of spring. And, so we did quite a bit to it. This person was very happy. They just didn't have a first Juggernaut, which is what this book is, in a clean way. And we gave it to them. If you cut back to me just for 1 second, when we do what we do, this is an owl card, right? So this kind of shows levels of comic book whiteness. And so, we use technology like colorimeters and other types of color measurement tools so we can get consistent whiteness on our books. And then we use, guides to make sure nothing's too white. Now, it might be too white because when you saw the before picture, it's shocking. But the reality is CGC doesn't get before pictures. I wouldn't look at it even if you gave it to them. They don't have a mechanism to receive it. They're not interested in that. So
it's funny with that too white thing, because I feel like that is a common, like, sort of colloquial thing to throw out with people. It's like, oh, that looks too white, but then is there actually too white?
Or go to my next example, please.
Okay, let's see.
So you tell me. Now, this is a low-grade Daredevil. There's some spine damage in this book, which is why it doesn't grade higher. But this book was tan as a biscuit. I mean, this thing was brown Betty, and so we lightened it up. You can see before and after under the left and the middle image. Those are shot under the same light in our environment. The right is CGC scan of a finished slab that they just posted and we took. So it's not shot the same way. So the whiteness kind of varies in all three images, but you can see the first two are shot in the same environment under the same light with the comic exactly in the same spot each time. And so, yeah, I mean, it really can't go. If you'll go to my next, so here's a low grade book. Here's a high grade book. This book had water tide line stains, dust or light shadows, which are like slightly darker edges. It had droplets and blops on it on the inside and outside cover. And, you can remove that as well. There are some changes. The red got slightly lighter on this. It's not nearly as light as what you see in that right-hand slab in that scan, but some reds and yellows don't react the same way to the light that blues and blacks do. And so you have to be very careful and use other techniques to make sure light only goes where you want it to go. And we invest in light management technology, among many others, to try to make sure we only put the light where we want it. But yeah, it could be too white. But what's really powerful is when you use these lightning techniques, you actually bring out more of the natural color. And so this book here was, with brown and tan behind all this beautiful blue on the front cover, it really is neutralized. It looks like your mom's pantyhose, And, when you take the pantyhose off, now you've got the real skin. You got that beautiful submariner tone that we believe is closer to what's intended. And you have this vivid blues, and really it's more cartoony. It's more like it's more like illustrative than an old master's, like an old stained soot covered Michelangelo on the ceiling waiting to be cleaned off.
Right. And then, so not to go back or revisit necessarily, but why is it that CGC has given purple labels, or could you speculate on like some, I'm not saying that the technique you guys do has gotten the purple labels, but like why has CGC given purple labels to whitening covers and things like that?
I won't speak for them. This is my understanding. First of all, they started out with something they did not understand, that they did not embrace, that they did not fully appreciate. And so they gave it something that showed that it wasn't dry cleaning in their view. And what's weird is you have conservation and restoration, and then you have dry cleaning. Dry cleaning is neither conservation nor restoration. Restoration is determined to improve the aesthetic. Conservation is determined to improve the structure. Dry cleaning improves the aesthetic. So if you don't carve it out, you're actually
for clarity, would dry cleaning be like I took an eraser and I like, is that dry cleaning? Okay.
Yeah. An eraser. So there are different types. So there's scraping, there's wiping, there's erasing.
Like a cotton ball.
Yeah, there's burnishing. There's other things that you do. But ultimately, in the professional world, dry cleaning is a form of restoration because all it does is improve the aesthetics. I can leave that book dirty. It's not going to hurt the book. I can scribble. I can draw a PP on the Batman. Not going to hurt the book. You with me? But you can clean it off legitimately because it improves the aesthetics. If you don't call it dry cleaning, it's technically restoration if you're not at CGC. CGC has its own definitions, which is fine. But ultimately what happened is when the lightning techniques hit the big time, the word light's not in here. And this book's 20 years late.
Right.
So, CGC is operated by a set of rules that it itself designs, and you had to intimately understand them as an expert or get screwed. And it took 20 years. This book came out last year to provide the first understanding of what supposedly is acceptable. And by the way, just so you know, restoration is defined in this book as an ideal. Restoration is defined as attempting to make the book more than it should be. That's restoration. Not what you added, not was something added. That's what they used to be. In this book, it's trying to make the comic more than it should be. That's it. Conservation is trying to make the comic survive as it should be. Now, that's conservation. So ultimately, what's happening, following these rules and dealing with this stuff is that CGC has cleaning designations in all these things. So they hit it with its harshest cleaning designation. It started with B1. You got a purple label because if it's an A, technically that's conservation. When you get a conservation label, that's considered A1, restoration. B, 1, 2, 3, and C, 1, 2, 3 are considered purely restoration, and therefore they get the purple label. So you should not get a purple label with an A grade on it, I believe. Might exist. Nothing will surprise me anymore. But ultimately, they started with these B1. You have light. B1 is the least amount, right? B is more severe than just pure professional. They deemed it unprofessional in the beginning.
Right.
Now it's moved to conservation, in my opinion, because they're deeming it professional. And they're going to incorporate it in their bag of tricks one day, I would imagine. And why wouldn't they? They're the biggest restoration company in the world. They don't care. Their job is just to call it and to sell it or to undo it. They'll take any side you pay them to take.
Yeah.
It's the market that decides it's worth less. But that was my take on why it was purple in the beginning. Now it's conserved. And when I see it from other people or people send me, they tried it, they got it conserved, it's sent to us, and they're asking us to do something next.
Yeah. What constitutes someone being professional versus amateur here? Because is that like a form I just got to fill out for CGC?
As I understand it, it's not how CGC. CGC is designating the residual observations as professional, right? They're judging that your changes to the comic are professional changes, or that you've made an amateur change, like hitting it with a Sharpie. They're not judging the person; they're judging the book.
Gotcha. So if I used professional techniques and I just myself, a random person, sent it in theory, I would be getting a B distinction versus a C distinction.
Not to my understanding. What's happening is you will make the book whatever you want to make it, and they will judge your craftsmanship. They will look at it under high magnification. They will look at it in their own natural or artificial light, and they will decide that the way you left this book, the way you the way you handed it to them anew. They look at it as if they've never seen it before. And when they look at it that time, you leave them with an impression that it's less than natural looking. That's simple. It's not natural.
Right.
It's white on 3 or 4 surfaces. You have a stain on the outside, but not on the inside. You have a stain on the inside, but not on the page. You have a stain on the inside and the page, but they don't match in severity. Like they're looking at it to see, and literally it's crazy, but 99% of why you get the label is what is on the inside of the book, and yet you can't even see it. And that's what's so crazy as we go back to the scam we're talking about with things like Mark Jewelers, Marvel value stamps, tattoos, and all these other things that affect the value of the comic. It's irrational because you can't ever get to it. It doesn't affect your enjoyment of the book. It's a purist notion in a niche market with irrational value swings. No problem. People who like to gamble, play the market, use technology to win. It's a perfect place to plant in comics. But ultimately, we're all part of a system that we don't fully control, where the inside of the book matters to the value, but literally is only being engineered in such a way where one party can tell you its value, and that's CGC. And that is both freakishly challenging and wonderfully interesting all at the same time.
No, it's very, very true. I think one time before I did a video about qualified books and stuff and tried to make the point of like, what would be the difference if, my missing Marvel value stamp that is that much of an interior page compared to on the back cover that's missing that much of a back corner, yet the one that, but in theory, because it's in the middle of the book, now all of a sudden I get a green, and then, in theory, wouldn't it be better? Because at least the cover is not disrupted, because once it's in the case, who cares, right? Like, so,
and for the outside, you can have a sloppy eraser rub through like golden age yellow cover, the worst cleaning job in the world, and get it in a blue label. You could have one dot of a little bit of like leftover foxing that's in the wrong place from otherwise perfect, gorgeous cleaning that makes everybody happy, that subtracts all these defects and problems and scars from the book, and you still get a grade that creates lower value in the marketplace. So it is a contradictory medium with confusing implementation of rules that are controlled by sometimes an illogical arbiter. I'm not speaking for anyone because I don't know their resumes, but I don't think anybody at CGC is trained in conservation. Honestly, not anybody at CGC. Of course they are. The graders, I don't know if the graders are professional conservators. I retract what I said. Of course, they're the world's greatest conservators. I'm not in any way throwing shade on these people. My point is the world's biggest pop culture aficionados are grading the comics from a pop culture view. In many cases, not how a professional conservator who is, and I'm not one either, would do it. I'm an artist. So basically, in our profession, you have art meets science. Conservators are the chemists of the art world. I'm more like an artist with a love of chemistry. So when it comes together, though, CGC grading is about structure first and aesthetics second. And so the reality is, even if you have a perfectly clean surface, if you have that color break or that tear at the staple or that corner crunch, something else, that will hurt the book a lot more. And that's why many times in notes, you don't get all the aesthetics notes, because the structural notes come first. It's only after all the structural complaints are gone, you get more than something like stain as a note.
Right. Well, Barry, I've taken up a good amount of your time. I know that you're a busy man, sir, but before we totally wrap up, maybe you can, I don't know, kind of leave the people with a little bit of information about, you and comic pressing and your service and what you can do and where people can find you, and maybe what they can expect, what they shouldn't expect, why somebody would want to grade a book or press and clean a book before maybe they grade it. But yeah, let the people know where they can find you if they have more questions.
Well, thanks, Mickey. I mean, I'm just honored to be here. I mean, I would like to meet you, whoever you are, because I just want to be a more active member of the community. So I'm just grateful to be here and to share my point of view. You can find me at comicpresser.com or on Instagram at comic_presser. We're a consultative business, so we're happy to take your call. We try to return emails within 24 hours. And I'm happy to look at books you have or books you might want that are like being listed for sale and you're not sure would they upgrade if you bought it. I'm interested in hearing, what you're doing. And many of you press and clean and study what's going on and are trying to cut through the hype. And me too. So, happy to brainstorm on something that, is valuable for both of us. And while CGC evolves, which I'm happy to continue to witness, see how we can all become better vintage paper curators that have both the pop culture and the historic value side mastered. So thanks, Mickey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Barry, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about, pressing and cleaning. Definitely, I think, for me, it's undeniable that pressing and cleaning has improved the aesthetics of all the books that I've ever, dealt with. When I had it done, I never regretted doing it. I mean, even if I don't grade it, just the enjoyment of it is significantly higher. So at least at that level, I definitely recommend people out there, go look more into it and explore it and see if it's something that is, something that they would like to do. But we'll definitely have to, follow up with you, Barry, again later on. I'm sure, sometime in 2024, there will be more interesting, happenings in the CGC restored space or other things that, as news comes out. And we'll have to get your perspective on it once again. But thanks again, Barry, for coming on the channel today. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks, Mickey. Thanks all.